absolutely 9/11 was the opening salvo. Even if the official story was true on that, right? The way that was presented to the public was to do as much psychological damage as possible. En masse. There was a reality in this world before 9/11, right? That hadn't really changed much since the 1960s. There had been a sort of a cultural growth, a change, a flux, a very positive time in the West in general, I think. I think there was tremendous growths in things like music and art and filmmaking, and the arts flourished, and it became a time where the average person was able to avail of technology to move themselves up the fields that they probably wouldn't have been able to previously. It was a kind of a mini renaissance, the period of the 60s to the 80s. And that kind of continued, but it wasn't as intense until 2001. If you watch news broadcast reports from New York City on the night before 9/11, it's like looking at a different planet compared to what was the next day. What happened there was a psychic shock, right? You had the first time in history, you had billions of people all over the world observing these horrific events in Lower Manhattan at the same time, right? This creates a tremendous amount of psychic energy, okay? And then you're entering into the world of theoretical physics, quantum physics, where we know that reality is both a particle and a wave function at the same time, depending on the observer effect. So that was the observer effect on steroids globally. So what happened then was the wave shot up, it jumped up. And we were put into a psychic state, and reality changed. And to sustain this wave, they had the invasion of Iraq. You had a country that had absolutely nothing to do with it. It even said they would cooperate with finding the terrorists who did it. Attacked, and you had people in America wanting the Iraqi government overthrown for 9/11, even though they were no more responsible for 9/11 than Iceland or, Macau. The wave function had to be sustained, this certain state of terror. And then this had all kinds of other spin-offs, such as Islamic terrorism, that really began to take off, and so on. And they had to keep this thing going. And the ultimate transformation or transformative moment was going to be the war on us. Your politicians and your government are actually at war with you. They're in office to destroy you on behalf of these globalist powers. And they're doing it through psychic weapons. It then went into biological warfare. That what happened with the release of that COVID vaccine was no different than the SS Gruppenführer pouring the Zyklon B into the showers at Auschwitz. It was the same thing. And they didn't lie to us. They're on video saying the next pandemic will kill so, and they're smiling and smirking.
So we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is will get attention this time.
In Ireland, we have an epidemic of childhood asthma, cancer, Alzheimer's, childhood obesity, another epidemic in Ireland. So we have these very serious illnesses that are affecting 30% or more of the population at epidemic levels, and there's almost nothing being done about them. Now you have a virus that's affecting, I don't know how many it affected. Jesus, hard to get a real figure, but it certainly wasn't more than 5%, not an epidemic level. And the reaction was to anaesthetize the entire Irish economy, to shut down all movement of people, of all civil liberties to be suspended, to isolate people in their homes, essentially killing many people through that isolation, because people die in isolation. In isolation, things die. To do all of that for something that was affecting so few people within the context of all these other epidemics. So all it took was a tiny bit of lateral thinking to go, hang on a second, you can't do that. But that level of lateral thinking seemed to be quite beyond the majority of people.
We just told them the facts, and the Irish people could decide for themselves. No, you did not tell them the facts. With the vast majority of those people who are reliant exclusively on the mainstream media, you did not tell them the facts. What you did was you were exceptionally selective about everything that you let them hear and see, and you froze out anything that didn't suit you, or didn't suit that narrative that was dictated to you. Don't be saying now that you were objective or that you gave everybody the full facts. You didn't. Stop gaslighting.
The minute you got a job at RT, the next day the phone would ring. Hello, Billy Murphy here from Carlow. We have a discotheque. I see you're working for RT now. Would you come down and spin a few records for it? We'll give you £1,000. And you thought, wow, just because I got a job at RT, I'm going to get paid to do something that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have a job at RT. So my question is this: how much money do you get to promote a medical product to the point of forcing people to engage with it and take it? Do you suddenly do it for free? Or do all of the people who promote the vaccine, did they do that out of the goodness of their heart? Were they paid to do that? On the government website, if you go on there today and you look, and it'll say, in 2021, 2022, there were no excess deaths. So I was like, hang on a minute, let me just check that. Went on the government website, there it is, no excess deaths. I'm going, if there were no excess deaths, what were those people talking about? Where were they getting those facts? And why were they pumping them out, other than to scare the shit out of people into taking part in an untested medical experiment? And that's what it was. And even the makers acknowledge this now. It wasn't tested and it was an experiment, yet people were threatened with losing their jobs, their livelihood, their ability to travel, and in some cases almost their kids, because they were being forced. This is a dictatorship. This has nothing to do with democracy. This is about being told, that's where you are, you stand there, you say nothing, and if you're Irish, you shut up until we get to you, if we get to you.
So COVID really was a compliance test, and to see how much they could get away with stuff when people don't engage their own brains. So now I think they're just going, we can say anything, we can do anything, and they're just going to go along with it because these guys are fast asleep. It's part of the demoralisation program as well, is to say, we don't care that you even notice. And that's when it goes into another level of, you're like, okay, we're not actually dealing with people who are like us. And that's a big shock to the system, because you think most people are kind of, care about doing the right thing, have some kind of moral compass, and, want what's good for all of us. You kind of think people are, like ourselves. And then you come to this really dark realization, no, they're not. And they really don't care. And in fact, they'd actually get some kicks out of watching you squirm, out of watching you in trouble. That's how they enjoy themselves. And then it goes even darker again, but I think that's for another show altogether, isn't it?
When you saw it in the demeanour of the political classes, the viciousness of them, the sadistic demeanour that they adopted in the face of people's hurt and consternation and bemusement, the way that they callously allowed people to die on their own in rooms, kept apart from their loved ones, the way they left the abortion clinics open but they closed the churches. All this stuff, it was just like, in your face, buddy, suck it up. It's like a caricature monstrosity that manifested suddenly in the public sphere, and it seemed to infect virtually all of the actors who were representing the state, representing the government, representing the media, which is of course the state anyway. Reality as it really was now asserting itself in our lives. The way we had it in our minds before was completely kaput. It is now manifest in plain sight what the reality of human existence is like, what the reality of politics is like, what really economics is about. And all the pretenses were literally dropped overnight. It had been a contract that's never existed. The promise of democracy, of freedom, they really were no more than baits to keep us in the game, to keep us doing what they needed us to do until they got their act together to pounce. And then they pounced. And that's really what this all was about. It was nothing to do with anybody's health, of course not. The time had come for them to assert control, because now they had the capability to do it. And everything we had believed before was bullshit, because it meant nothing in the face of this decision to act and to move.
The techniques that were being used in terms of how the media was actually using black magic in a very literal sense. When I say black magic, I mean like imposing a false paradigm upon the populace. There was ridiculous ones here in Ireland where they set up an army tent down by the docks in Dublin and they parked a naval ship behind it. What has a naval gunship got to do with fighting a viral infection? But the whole thing was designed to invoke a state of terror, a state of emergency that began with Chinese people going down on the ground. And it took on a very sinister aspect when they showed the footage of the trucks lined on a street in Milan in Italy, deliberately done at night time, nothing being loaded on, nothing being taken off, and not even telling you what they were there for. They purely existed as a symbol for people to fill in the blanks that these are the trucks that are being brought in to carry out the tens of thousands of bodies of people. Without anyone actually even saying it, you finish the conclusion in your own head. Oh dear, we're really in trouble now. Now we all know how much confusion and gaslighting and paradoxical information was central to this at the beginning, and all the way through it, you don't need a mask, you need 2 masks, this kind of thing. They were basically declaring psychological warfare upon the human race.
The conduct of the mainstream media in relation to COVID is simply unforgivable, and they must not be allowed to forget that. They must be punished to the highest and most draconian order for what they did with people regarding COVID. The fear, the isolation, the gaslighting, the hate, the divisiveness, and the politicians who use the mainstream media to incite hatred against those who had chosen to exercise their right not to get a medication that they didn't want to get. Remember the politicians who said people shouldn't be allowed to go to shops. Remember them all. We've kept it. And what I say to all of those people regarding the COVID, we will hold you accountable. That's my promise. We will be there for you and you will be held accountable for what you did. And that includes the media. Holding people to account isn't a matter of lining them up against walls with machine guns. You need to put in place a legislative framework to do that. Otherwise it lacks legitimacy. We always say that those people who are so culpable regarding the COVID lack legitimacy. They do lack legitimacy. But we have to be better than they are. When it's our turn, and it will be our turn, we're not going to be the barbarians that they were or tried to be to us.
It's humiliating, and people showing a piece of paper to have a cup of coffee. Would you get the fuck out of here? What are you doing? You should be ashamed. If you've done that, you should really look. It's not my place to tell someone who should and shouldn't do, but if I did that, I'd be taking a long look in the mirror and ask myself, who am I? And I'd look into history, and then I'd ask myself again, what have I done, and would I do it again? Because it's wrong. That type of behaviour is just fucking wrong. You can't be any clearer than that, and if you don't know that, well, you're your own enemy. You'd turn on anyone. Where's the integrity? Where's the honour in that? When your neighbours, your friends, your relatives, they can't. Do you think you would have stood up in South Africa, apartheid, or in Germany, or anywhere? You'd be throwing stones at Jesus. You'd be the first one with the stones out.
First I was a bit flabbergasted, but then I understood it because I used to totally buy the line, the government narrative, the narrative, whatever it was, the mainstream narrative. When I was working as a journalist, I didn't question things that much. And I used to get very angry at the people who said 'twas all a lie, 'twas all a hoax, and 'twas all corruption. I used to get very angry at that. I said, well, if that's the case, what you're saying is that everyone's duped. We're all duped. All us smart, college-educated people, all us critical thinkers, all us compassionate humans are just a whole load of idiots who are buying into this. That's what you're saying. And so I understand very much the hostility people feel against the conspiracy theorists or the people who were questioning the rot. I understand it because I used to do that. I was there, The truth is I've come through that. And when I look back at my perceptions, then I see how shallow they were. And unfortunately, that is where those people were coming from. A lot of people don't have energy. A lot of people are very sick here. I see a lot of sick people. You notice it when you go on holidays. You go, Jesus, people aren't overweight as a rule here. But they are here. Again, the vulnerable teenager, eats a lot of fast food because she doesn't know what's good for her.
Medicine, on top of that pharmaceutical, all in bed together, hoodwinking people into thinking that we need to do this for you because you can't do it yourself, and people believe in that. Branching an arm out to our lives. You have to stay at home now, you can't go anywhere. You can only go between, maybe 5 miles or whatever, and restricting you that way. And you can't walk into a shop without freaking wearing a mask, or you have to have an injection if you want to go here or go there. To allow someone outside family, someone outside community, someone outside friendship to take control of your life. Birth and freedom of movement and freedom of even speech in some cases, as far as I'm concerned, would be the fucking death of us. So,
Now you can say, oh, it's all conspiracy theory, but there was a time in Germany when Germans would hear about what was going on in the East, the mass killings of Russian soldiers and everything. They said, that's not true, that's all lefty lies. They didn't use the word conspiracy theory, but the same effect.
There's a fear attached to it, if you look into it, it doesn't look like an innocent mistake. It looks like there's some people in power that want to force vaccinate everyone. It's kind of a dark thought, isn't it? It's like, yeah, okay, so who is it? Then you look and you go, okay, and you go and you peel back and you go, oh, it's the WHO, and then it's Bill Gates, and what's he doing? Oh, now he owns all the farmland and he's trying to block the sun. And so who's behind him? And does it really matter who's pulling the puppet strings? I'm not sure it does. So we find out, oh, it's that group, or it's that group, or it's that individual, it's that family, it's this, oh, it's Bono, you know, whoever. We find out who, it doesn't really matter. Either we act with integrity ourselves or we don't. And if we go along with the narrative, as soon as the narrative is acting against ourselves and others, well, you know, we become our own enemy. People, when they're desperate, do desperate things. When they act from fear, they do fearful things. And I think that's the point. You can't really lose until you bend, until you compromise. So yeah, like someone could hold me down and get me to do something. They could never get me to do it by choice. So I think enough people will just go, no, we're not having it. And when enough people do that, boom, it'll burst and it'll all come crumbling down.
COVID was a psychic attack. Among so many other things, it was a psychic attack. And if you refused to buy into the psychic attack, they'd lost from the outset. So if you just said, no, this is bullshit, go away, they'd lost. What I'd say about getting the needlecraft, in all honesty, is that that was the most important thing you had to do in your life, was not get that. So to be then saying, oh, well, I got it because I had to. Were you pinned down? Were you taken off a train like at Auschwitz? Were you dragged off a train and jabbed with the needlecraft? Because if you weren't, then you didn't have to get it. Do better next time.
DNA seems to have certain functionality in it that uses our nervous system to lock us into this reality. Affecting the DNA affects our version of reality. That's how our nervous system regulates through this quantum theory, this collective miasmic dream we have. It affects everything. And the fertility rates have collapsed all over the world. Standard mortality rates are running at 30% in many Western countries right now, directly because of the COVID vaccine. And we're just being wiped out. And it's not just us, it's also the immigrants, the refugees. They're being targeted as well too. They might be used initially as kind of foot soldiers of the regime, as a kind of a super NGO. But that's the stage before. They'll also be subject to this chemical alteration. You want to talk about natural law, right? This is natural law. The COVID vax was to be sold as the genesis moment for the rest of humanity's history to be vaccinated regularly and upgraded with software, right? That was their magic bullet. Well, as a result of that, I believe that maybe all vaccines are now dead. Because people are not only skeptical because of that vaccine, but the people like me who are not anti-vaxxers, I've decided now, I'm pretty skeptical now about all vaccines. So the exact opposite of what they wanted is now the norm. There are now billions of people in this world are going, I'm never letting any kind of vaccine in me ever again. That's natural law.
I mean, what were they thinking? The doctors think we're going to trust them after this? I mean, I don't care how many A's you got in the Leaving Cert. I don't care how many certificates are up on the wall. I mean, this was so simple, this test. How could you fail this test for the doctors? Why did you not give informed consent? You know, the very basics. And why ignore now these excess deaths? So I would say all trust, for me at least, is gone, broken. Now, if I went out there and broke my leg, you know, I'd be carted off to A&E and you'd all be laughing at me because I've just recorded this, you know. You'd be like, you see, you do need the doctors. So there is that. And we've all been in medical situations where you bloody well need them and you're grateful for them. But I'm sorry, trust has been broken. I can't see us going back again. I don't blame any mother for trying to look at alternatives, especially what happened again during COVID. Partners weren't allowed in and they were trying to force pregnant ladies to take part in a dangerous medical trial. You're not supposed to even eat tuna when you're pregnant, let alone have some unknown substance we don't know the long-term outcome of be injected into your body. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I interviewed Dr. Naomi Wolf there recently. She's looking at Pfizer's own documents that the FDA tried to conceal for 75 years. So why are they trying to conceal it for 75 years? Because the evidence is damning. There it is, lads, there it is. Look, it's Pfizer's own documents. And as she said herself, she would have been sued if it wasn't their own documents. You know, she'd be in jail by now. The stuff she has found is absolutely shocking. Pfizer were preoccupied with the reproductive organs. Why so? It's supposed to be a respiratory illness. So why were they so preoccupied with the reproductive organs? And, you know, what she found is just off the charts when it comes to miscarriage, malformations, spontaneous abortions. So of course these women are going to go, wait a second, we need an alternative. And it's one of the good things that has come out of the whole thing. People are looking for alternatives, different ways to heal. We're looking back at herbalism, we're looking back at different methods. I mean, even the doctors are going to have to start doing that soon. People who really want to heal or help. It must be the most sacred moment when a child comes into the world. I mean, it's massive. So I love this. I love that these ladies are doing something special and trusting their own instincts and intuition as well. I just didn't have the confidence, and I was friends with women who were into breastfeeding and natural births and home births. And I was always just, I admired them so much, but I was busy, doing all my work, you know, going here, going there. I was just afraid that something would go wrong. Well, I was told, no, it wouldn't, but I was afraid. But I'm very, very interested to see how these ladies are going to get on.